I was on my own last weekend at home, an exciting man that I am. I took that time to sharpen our kitchen knife. I live enough, I know. Why was I doing that? Well, a blunt knife is not fit for purpose because they don't cut properly, they don't cut safely. You push hard and stab yourself in the thumb. They don't do their jobs properly. We're on my way to my parents a few weeks ago with our girls. We saw something that does its job brilliantly. We saw some of these, they live out in the countryside where it's harvest time and the fields were full of combine harvesters. I told you that was exciting. And of course these are brilliant at doing their job because all at the same time they cut the crop from the field and they thresh it to separate the grain from the stalks and they chuck all the chaff and the rubbish out the back while collecting up all the grain and then they fit it into the trailer and they do all that at the same time. Blunt knives, they're useless for their purpose, whereas combine harvesters couldn't be more amazingly useful for theirs. And why do we indulge my slightly strange weekend? Well, because as we continue our series on the Sermon on the Mount this morning, Jesus is all about purpose. He's all about purpose, and he's particularly speaking about our purpose. In this bit of the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking to his disciples, and he says to them, and he says to you, if you're a Christian here this morning, I've made you and I've called you for a purpose. I've got a job for you to do, and I've given you all that you need to do that job perfectly. Jesus says to us this morning, don't be a blunt knife, be a combine harvester. Okay, they're not quite these words, but you get what I mean. That's what we're thinking about this morning. And as we explore Jesus' purpose for us today, we're going to see that he starts with a sober warning. He goes on to give us a wonderful encouragement. And then he tells us what it's all about, what will happen as we live out his plan for us. But first comes the warning. Have a look at verse 13, Matthew 5, with me. Jesus says to his followers, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the salt of the earth, Jesus says. So don't lose your saltiness. What does he mean by that? Well, obviously he's speaking metaphorically, and in the ancient world, salt was used for all sorts of different things, but there were perhaps three main things. The first was to act as a preservative, to prevent decay and corruption, to stop things getting worse. The second was as seasoning, making food taste pleasantly distinct, adding flavour to it. And then thirdly, in small doses, salt was used as a fertiliser to bring life and health to the soil. And you could spend a bunch of time trying to pin down which of those main three, or indeed a bunch of any of the other ones, Jesus is particularly talking about here, he particularly has in mind. But I actually think that the broadness and all the different things salt was used for is the point. You see, just as salt made and makes a difference in the world, so too, Jesus' followers are to make a difference in the world. And they're to do that in all sorts of different ways. I guess particularly they're to act as a preservative, slowing down decay in our society. More positively, they're to act as good at seasoning our society with the distinctive good deeds. And they're to bring spiritual new life as they share their faith, and they're to promote the holistic health and well-being of the people they live among, whether that's advocating for those at the very start of life, or caring for those at the very end of life, or indeed helping those who are vulnerable in the midst of life. Jesus says to his followers, you are the salt of the earth. You're to make a difference in the world. But there's a problem. Jesus says, he says, salt can lose its saltiness. Now, before all the chemists among us go, no, that's not possible, Jesus, wait a minute, salt's a stable compound, that just doesn't happen. Well, you'd be right to say that. So to work out what Jesus is on about here, we need to know that the way salt was made in the ancient world meant that the salt you'd have in your home had a bunch of impurities in it as well. And because the salt was more soluble than all those impurities, it can sometimes sort of leach away over time. And you'd be left with sort of saltless residue. And actually was good for nothing apart from topping up the path outside your house. Okay, chemists aren't happy, but what about the rest of us? Do we see, do we feel, do we hear Jesus' warning here? Just don't lose your saltiness. Don't become a blunt knife. Don't be completely ineffective at the task I have for you of being distinct in the world. Puts it quite strongly, doesn't he? He effectively says, don't be the disciple who might as well be thrown out on the garbage heap. Well, if we're going to preserve our saltiness, let me mention two things that we will want to avoid. Here's the first. We'll sort of lose our saltiness. We won't do any good in society if we withdraw from the world. After all, salt's no good at the back of the kitchen cupboard, tucked away safely in the salt shaker, and then making its way out onto the worktop. Now, don't withdraw. Why? Because Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. You're the salt out there in the world, in all corners of society, whether that's as a Christian parent or a Christian politician, a sports player or a scientist or a therapist or a trader, wherever you are, be there, Jesus says, preserving, seasoning, bringing life. Of course it's good to have Christian friends to gather as church on Sunday. They are really, really good things to do. But Jesus says if we spend all our time in a sort of holy huddle, we're not living out what it is He calls us to. We gather that we might go out. And I know it can be tempting to retreat a bit in the face of all the moral mess out in the world, but we don't have to preserve it in isolation. Or another thing that could tempt us to withdraw is maybe that persecution we were thinking about last week. But as we saw, actually, there's blessing to be found in the midst of that. So that's not a reason to withdraw, not a reason to lose our saltiness. And in fact, as we come to think about what God might do through that, there's all the more reason to live distinctively, even if it might mean pain and persecution for us. We'll lose our saltiness. We won't be the salt of the world if we withdraw from the world. So I guess it's worth asking ourselves some questions, isn't it? It's worth asking, well, where do I get out in the world? Where am I spending time with non-Christians? What might I need to do to meet some more? If I do find most of my time with Christian friends. And as you think about that place or that friendship group or maybe even that bit of your family, and you think, oh, I'm the only Christian in that space. As well as thinking, how might I bring others into that? It's worth thinking, good God has put me here for a reason. Is this somewhere that I should try and stay? Someone knows that before I worked for a church, I was a junior researcher in a physics department at the university. And despite what all the new atheists at the time might have had you believe, there was a surprising number of Christians in that department. And actually that was something that liberated me to explore church ministry. I think if I was the last rat leading the sinking ship, so to speak, I may well have stayed to see that salty, distinctive presence there. It certainly would have been something I would have thought hard about. But the salt of the earth, when we're in the earth, out there in the world, so it's worth thinking, well, where am I meeting, spending time with, getting to know non-Christians? And when you point that out, of course, I guess the next question to ask is, well, do they know that I'm a Christian? Is my life so distinctive, so salty, that they're asking questions about why I am like that? Because actually that's the second temptation that we can have, second temptation to avoid is that compromise with the world. You see, it's no good being out in the earth if we aren't the salt of the earth. If our Christian distinctiveness just leaches away, well, we're unable to live out the purpose Jesus has for us. So maybe it's also worth asking, are there people with whom we need to renew our hungering and thirsting for righteousness? Are there places where we need to recognise afresh that actually we are poor in spirit, that we do need God's help if we're going to stay salty in those environments? Jesus' challenge to his people this morning is this: you are the salt of the earth. Don't lose your saltiness. There's a challenge. Here's the encouragement. Verse 14. Have a look with me. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others. See, you hear what Jesus is saying to his followers. He's saying, you are the light of the world, so let your light shine. Of course, more famously, Jesus said that he was the light of the world, which is why I think the lamp imagery in verse 15 is so helpful. Because, of course, technically a lamp doesn't shine. Even though it might look like it does, the light within it is shining out of the lamp. Just as the light of the flame, the candle light, shines out of the lamp, so too the light of Jesus shines out from his disciples as he works in them, as he changes them to make them more like him. And it's wonderful encouragement. See what Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. As long as you don't put your lamp under a bowl, which I think is the equivalent of withdrawing from the world. As long as you don't do that, Jesus says, if your lamp is out in the open, then it is shining, it is giving light to people all around. You are making a difference just by virtue of being there. Or to shift the imagery a bit as Jesus does. You're like a town on a hill that cannot be hidden. Last Easter, my family went to Athens, and of course the Acropolis in the top left of that picture is famously on a hill. And wherever you are in the centre of Athens, the Acropolis looms over you. You can't get away from it. It sort of appears from around corners like a child jumping out at you. It comes out from behind trees. Even when you're visiting the other monuments in Athens, it's sort of there in the background, shining in the Greek sunshine, saying, don't forget about me, I'm over here. A town built on a hill, it cannot be hidden. A lamp shining on a lampstand, because it is unmissable. And Jesus says to us, he says to his people, that's who you are, that's what you're like. So let your light shine. And of course, because Jesus says you are the light of the world, because it's his light shining within us. It's not something that we have to conjure up. He doesn't say, you must be the light of the world, or try really hard to be the light of the world. No, it says you are the light of the world. And in fact, you would have noticed the same is true of our saltiness. You are the salt of the earth. Jesus made you and me distinctive, life-giving, God's goodness showing preservatives in his world. He's made us those things, and all we have to do is to not become ineffective, to not become a hidden light, to not become a dull night. So you probably joined us, but how is it that we do this? How do we let our light shine? Well, we put ourselves out there as Christians. We allow our faith and the difference it makes to our lives to be visible to all. We spend time with others, living those salty, distinctive lives among them. And we're going to have loads and loads of practical examples of what that might look like for us in the Sermon on the Mount as we work through it in the coming weeks. But already, as Andrew mentioned in his prayers, we've had the Beatitudes, and actually living out the distinct life, the blessed life of the start of Matthew 5 is a brilliant place to begin. If you live as someone who's poor in spirit, who's meek, who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, who's merciful, who's pure in heart, who's a peacemaker, if you do those things, your light will shine, will be salty and distinctive. In the same way, Jesus said, let your light shine before others. And in fact, there's another encouragement hidden in Jesus' words here, because, well, this isn't a solo endeavour. The you here is a plural one. So it's not you, Dane, are the light of the world, or you, Edmund, are the light of the world, or you came to the light of the world. It's rather you, our church, are the light of the world, or you, your group of Christian friends, are the light of the world, or you, your Christian union at work or university, you are the light of the world. Something that we do together. Some of us are brilliant inviters to church because we instinctively get this. You get that church family is a wonderful witness where Jesus' light shines all the brighter. It's actually shining up for all of us. But of course, it's not just on Sundays that we get to do this. We can invite non-Christian friends to things from church, can't we? Whether that's the volleyball sessions at Barn Elms, or the games of chess in the pub, or some of the events that we're going to be running as a church in the coming months. Whether as parents, it's the junior drivers group that Kimberly mentioned earlier, or at the other end of the age spectrum, for those with children, the Ignite socials for our preteens and teens. And we can do that because we together are the light of the world. Or to return to that town on the hill imagery, it's like we're a community on display for the watching world to see, to show that outside world how good it is to belong to Jesus and to live for him. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You, all my people. And so I guess another thing that means, this is something for all of us to be involved in. And if you're someone who hears these words of Jesus and says, yeah, but Jesus, my lamp is feeling a bit weak, my light is flickering a little bit, or actually I feel my saltiness leaching away, I don't know how effective I can be. I actually remember this, that light has never lost a fight with the darkness. You'll know when there's just the smallest crack of light through a door can illuminate the entire dark room. And perhaps particularly if you're going through the mill for your faith at the moment, but you're clinging on, actually you're one of the most powerful witnesses that there can be. Like that reading we had from Psalm 34, that title, that heading James read, a psalm that David wrote when all he could do to protect himself was to pretend to be insane. I mean, that's not a position of strength, is it? He was completely up against it, completely going through the mill, and yet, thousands of years later, what are we doing? We were reading the words he wrote, reflecting on that. And he's saying, glorify the Lord with me. Even if our lamp is flickering like David's was, it's still light that we can shine. Jesus said, you are the light of the world, so let your light shine before others. And where does all this go? What's the point of this sort of salty, illuminating style of life? Why is this what Jesus wants for us? Why is this what he's equipped us for? Well, look again at verse 16. In the same way, let your light shine before others. Why? That they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Like the moth that gets drawn to the flame. So people will be drawn to Jesus because they'll see his light shining in us. There will be people who glorify our Heavenly Father because they've seen the good that he's doing through our distinctive living. They want to know more, and they want it for themselves. And the word translated good in verse 16, it could just as easily be translated beautiful. People will be drawn to Jesus because of the beautiful lives he enables you to live. And isn't that what we want for the watching world? Don't we want people we know, our friends and family, our neighbours and colleagues, to glorify God by coming to know Jesus as their Lord and Saviour? Isn't that what we want for those who live around us? Could that be why Jesus has left us here, why he hasn't taken us home yet? Jesus said that's the reason he's made us different and distinctive. So he says, don't lose your saltiness. Let your light shine that your Father in heaven might be glorified.